Hey there, Emmanuel here from WebDevFuel, and today you're going to learn exactly if you should use an HTTP framework with Go. And the answer might actually surprise you. So the answer is no, you should not be using an HTTP framework when building web applications with Go. And you should instead be using separate packages to solve specific problems that you need solved inside your application. So here's exactly why. First of all, is the cost of learning a new API. So think about this way. Each time that you learn something new, you will need to spend time to learn it. You need to spend time learning the APIs. You also need to spend time learning exactly how the person that built that specific tool intended you to use it. You need to learn also the quirks of a particular tool, and that costs time, headaches, and a lot of money, specifically if you are working with a team. And even if you are working alone, you will also need to spend time doing this, time that you could be using just building stuff for your clients, and all that kind of stuff. And in the case that you need to switch from one HTTP framework to another, because it either doesn't do exactly what you want to do or you find a problem with it, then because that HTTP framework covers so much of your application, you will need to learn something all over again, and it usually takes a lot of time to learn it. Again, because it covers so much of your applications, there's a lot of stuff to usually learn inside of an HTTP framework. So again, the cost of learning new APIs is one of the reasons why I believe that you should not be using an HTTP framework when building web applications with Go. Next is the cost of refactoring. Now, usually as developers, we want to stay as much as possible away from refactoring. Now, I know that most of web developers don't think of it like this, but you usually want to build something once and you want it to be stable and good for you to use for years to come. And when you are using an HTTP framework that, let's say, it releases a new version, then you will need to go into your application and refactor a lot of different things. Again, because the HTTP framework takes care of a lot of stuff. Let's say, for example, the routing, then it also takes care of the JSON encoding and decoding. It also takes care of, let's say, the query params, and also, for example, the JSON response that it sends to the client. So because it takes care of so many different things, you will have to refactor your entire application each time that you either want to go from one version to another, or you want to move from one to another. But if instead you simply use one package to solve one particular problem, you can just upgrade that particular package, and then you go ahead, you refactor that particular package, and the rest of your application stays untouched that you would otherwise need to refactor. So again, the second reason why I believe that you should not be using an HTTP framework when building web applications with Go is the cost of refactoring, either when you want to upgrade to a new version or you need to upgrade to a new version, or when you want to move to a different HTTP framework package altogether. Next, the reason number 3 why you should not be using an HTTP framework to build Go web applications is because learning the Go standard library will be useful in other projects. Now think about it like this. If you go ahead and you simply grab a routing package, let's say that you go ahead and you use the she router to simply handle all of the routing inside of your application, and then inside of the functions that actually handle all of the logic for your request and then sends back a response, if you inside of those functions simply use the Go standard library to, let's say, encode and decode JSON and then to send a response back to the client, that knowledge will translate to other projects. Let's say that you want to, for example, build a CLI application, a command line interface application that you want to, for example, use as an internal tool, either for yourself if you build projects alone for clients or for your team. So if you go ahead and you learn all of that JSON encoding and encoding stuff, that will also translate into that CLI application. But if instead you go ahead and you grab something like GoGen, then the API will not translate and you'll be learning something in order to build a web application, but the knowledge will not translate into the other projects that you want to build with Go. And the final reason is that tools that provide a lot of different features are usually not that great. Now, I know that this is not always the case, there are always exceptions to this rule, but usually not only when it comes to web development tools, but also when it comes to user interface tools. So let's say that you use an application to do something. Usually if an application tries to do a lot of different things and it tries to provide a lot of different features, the application is not really that great at any one of those things. Now, the same thing also applies for web development. Usually, if an HTTP framework tries to do a lot of different things, it is not really that great at doing none of them. So in my experience, when using the shear router, the experience is much better than using something like GoGen. And I believe that's because GoGen tries to do so many different things that it actually cannot be that great at doing one particular thing. But instead, because shear router focuses on providing one specific solution to one particular problem, it is great at providing one specific solution to one particular problem. And again, if you do not in the future like one particular package, you can always swap it out for another because you are not using simply one HTTP framework to do everything for you. You can, let's say, for example, that you want to switch the shear router for another router, your code inside your function that handles all of the encoding and decoding and all of the connections to the database are going to be intact, and you do not need to go ahead and change it because you can simply go ahead, change the code that routes all of the requests to the functions, and the functions stay intact and you do not need to change it. So again, this is the final reason why I believe that you should not be using an HTTP framework when building web applications with Go. And finally, to recap, you again should not be using an HTTP framework to build web applications with Go, but you should instead go ahead and grab a particular tool that is great for solving a specific problem. And that is usually what also happens with the Unix philosophy. You have a lot of different tools that work well together, and then if you do not like one particular tool inside of that tool set, you can simply go ahead, swap it for another one, and your application still works very well. So let me know in the comments what you think of this, if you agree, if you disagree, if you really like using HTTP frameworks to build web applications with Go, and also subscribe to get notified of future content because I'm going to be doing in the future videos about how to be using particular packages that I find very useful when building web applications with Go.